This is a quick demonstration of the Integrated Service Layer, ISL, and the support it provides for Java Management Extensions, JMX, and for web services. In this example, in this demonstration, we will be creating a simple ISL service, adding management support to it, turning it into a web service, and finally creating a web service or an ISL service from a WSDL provided by a web service. This is the Eclipse Integrated Development Environment, and this shows the first one we're going to show is the address book interface. This is the interface that we'll be creating a service for. The service will do two things. It will add an entry into its database record, and it will retrieve a string representation of a name that a user provides. The address entry itself will be a Java object. Now the implementation is very simple. We implement the address book. We're not going to persist this information. We're going to store it in a map, so it's going to be transient. The two methods that we are required to provide are implemented. And at the bottom, this is the way we integrate into ISL and create a service for this object. We use the generic service class. The generic service class requires us to provide three things: a user-friendly name, which we have, the object that implements the interface that we're interested in using, and the interface itself. We bind those three things together, and that creates what we call the generic service. This service is now available and can be used within ISL. One thing we want to do extra here is we're going to add an advertisement. In this case, we'll be adding the service rep UI descriptor, which is a generic interface that uses Java Reflection to decide how to create and lay out a GUI for interacting with the service. Typically, services are intended to be interacted with by other services, and it's difficult. You have to write code usually to interact with a service. This UI will provide us the ability to test it and demonstrate its capabilities. And then the final thing we do is we're going to register it with ISL, and this will place it within the ISL lookup service, and it'll be available to be discovered by other services. The address object itself is going to be implementing this interface, which is an address. It has the typical street number, street name, city, state. It also has a thing called the phone number. Phone number is an object, a Java object, so when we go and create a WSDL for this object, we will be creating a complex type for the phone number. Now the phone number itself is also going to be internally going to include two other complex types. One is the exchange and the area code part of that number. So we've broken the phone number down into three pieces, and each one of these, like the area code, is an object, and it includes the integer value of the area code, and the exchange is a string representation of the typical exchange phone number, the NXX. So we've done a lot of mixing and matching. Some things are interfaces, some things are classes, and we've mixed strings and integers and stuff around to demonstrate the capability and test it. So we'll bring that down, and we'll see the ISL console. This is the ISL console that has a lookup service currently running. And this is where services will register. They'll discover a lookup service, they'll register with it, and then the lookup service will also be places where you would go to find services that are currently running. Now I have a script to start the address service that we just created. I'll start it up. Now one thing, it just registered up here. Now one thing that I wanted to note on here, typically when creating ISL components, you include the isl.jar file. However, when you're using web services, you also have to include the web services-rt.jar file. This is provided by Sun, but it's included in the ISL distribution. So we'll put that on the side. Now this is the address book, and now if we right-click on it, we'll see some things that we can do with it. Some of them are grayed out. We can't do it right now. Attributes is where we can see information about the object itself, where the service is located, some other list of advertisements that it provides. The other thing is the graphical interface. The graphical interface is the interface that's going to be generated dynamically based on the information that we provided in the address book interface. It has the two methods that interface provided. And we're going to go ahead and use the first one and show how we can interact with an object using this generic interface. So let me go ahead and enter some information in this. Now you'll notice when I hover over these fields that I see the data types that are expected. So if I entered in something that was not an integer in the street number field, then it would not work. So you have to kind of know your service, but this does relieve you by building this interface like this from writing your own code. So let me enter one in here for GITI 1920. Association Drive, Reston 20190. And now you'll notice also that when it did the reflection and built the interface, it didn't organize them in quite the way that you would typically organize if you were doing it by yourself. For example, the phone number is sort of backwards, but that's just the way it discovered the fields within the user interface. 703, and the exchange is 652, and the state is Virginia. So I'm going to invoke that. This is a synchronous service, so when I invoke it over on the left side here in the panel that's kind of hidden partially, you'll see that it was actually sent over to the service, and the service received it, and the service has added it to its map. So I can go now and invoke the second method and go and try to retrieve that. The only one that's stored there right now is the GITI. So I'll invoke this, and you'll notice also some activity over here, but also in the return value you'll see that we have our association drive, and you notice also the phone number is correctly formatted because the service knows how to format it, and it formatted it for us as part of the return value. So now I want to close that, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm actually going to terminate this application, and you'll notice that as soon as I terminated it, it disappeared from the registration up here. Now one of the things I want to do first is I want to change the configuration, and I want to add and enable. Typically management is not enabled. I am going to enable it and save that. Now what that does when we start it up, and I haven't changed any code, I just restarted it with a different set of properties, and it was registered. And now when I come up here, you'll notice that I have an additional thing that's no longer grayed out, and that's the management interface. Now if I select that, it will launch the Java JConsole. This is provided with Java and then the development kit, and this shows a summary of what's going on in the Java virtual machine. We can look at memory usage, so you can debug and watch things like that going on in your code. And this is within the entire, not just the ISL components, but within the entire JVM. The threads that are being used, the classes that have been loaded, and then the mbeans. These are management beans. We can see that in here we've registered a management bean, and we have exposed the name, the information about the object, and also we have some methods that we've exposed. So right here we have register, deregister, and terminate. Since it's already registered, this won't do anything right now, but if I deregister it, you'll notice that it disappeared.